Welcome to Inside IT Automation, a ScriptRunner production.
So yeah, welcome everyone to our first Inside IT Automation conversation with Adam Bertram, also known as Adam the Automator, and it's great to have you with us. You are in the PowerShell community for a long time. You're an independent technology professional. You have your own website. You've written a couple of books. You're doing courses and workshops. So I think there's a lot to talk about. And to kick off the conversation, maybe for people who don't know you and your background, maybe you can give us a little background of your IT journey so far.
Sure. As you said, that my name is Adam Bertram. I started out in IT in 1998 or so, and then as of 12, 13 years or so ago, I really started learning scripting. I started out with VB script, did all the things with VB script. I was always into automation. And then shortly after, I heard about this thing called Monad, and I started using that. And then ever since then, I've been using PowerShell for everything. Before, it was primarily in the job, so I would automate, just about everything in my job. And then maybe, was it eight or 9 years ago or something like that, I really started getting involved in the community, doing more, sharing more of my code on GitHub. That's when I started writing a lot of articles. Then soon after, I wrote the PowerShell for Sysadmins book. I wrote several ebooks, the Pester book, and I started the blog AdamTheAutomator.com, where it was originally just me writing my experiences with PowerShell mainly. But as a few 3 years ago maybe or so, I started inviting other people. So now it's just a combination of anything IT tutorial sort of site. So nowadays, you can see behind me, I do a lot of Lego stuff, but I still do a lot of PowerShell content, primarily through Pluralsight mostly now.
Great, perfect. So I think you already kind of answered the next questions about when was the first time you actually heard about PowerShell. It was during the Monad days already.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it was primarily, I started using 1.0, and then I really started using it when it started coming with XP. So I went in PowerShell 2 is when I really started using it for about everything.
All right, great. All right. So Marcus, I think we have the next question here, huh?
Yeah, sure. So what was the biggest aha moments when you started using PowerShell?
That's a good question. There's been a lot of them. I think the biggest aha moment when coming from PowerShell, coming from just hardcore VB script. I used VB script for everything before I was using PowerShell. And using VB script, I would create these I would even go into creating classes and HTAs with VB script. But then as I started to get into PowerShell, I had that big moment where it just simplified so much stuff that I was dealing with VB script. Instead of writing a script that was 50 lines long that created an AD user or something like that, it came down to one new AD user. That came down in the commandlet. That was probably the biggest, I guess, the overarching theme was what I had with PowerShell. It was simple. It just did out of the box exactly what I wanted it to.
And were there any obstacles you came across, like things you had to kind of relearn when you coming from VB script, turning in and moving to PowerShell?
Oh yeah, you should. I did a little bit of PHP development back in the day, and you should see some of my I just looked at some of my earlier PowerShell code actually yesterday, and I had to immediately get rid of all the semicolons at the end of the lines and use correct verbs and all that stuff. And I used camel case for functions and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of that old methodology kind of came over because PowerShell is so adaptable. You can bring over your old practices into PowerShell a lot of the times. And I did originally until I started learning more and more about, okay, this is not you can do it in PowerShell that way, but this is not really the way you should do it in PowerShell. So soon afterwards, I started learning the PowerShell best practices and the way to do things. And the code has gotten much better since then.
Okay. So then, how did you learn PowerShell? What are your ways to learn PowerShell?
My ways to learn PowerShell, even though I do courses, I should probably tell you just do courses. That wasn't my thing. How I typically learn is I will do a very, very high level search or even a small course about just show me what is out there. I don't need to know how to do it. I just want you to show me what is out there. So how I typically learn things is I first just do a very high level overview of give me all the features, everything that this tool per product can do. And then once I know what it can do, what the capabilities of it are, then I will dive in and just start fooling around with it. There's no A to Z. Here's an outline of what you do. My way of learning is just chaos. It's just, oh, that's neat. I'm going to drive down this rabbit hole. Oh, that's neat. Go down this rabbit hole. That's how I do. I just go off of all kinds of different places and just explore, and it's just chaotic.
and so if you
do it the same way.
And I think it's about the use case, right? And having something that you really are interested in, or maybe actually even maybe forced to automate, and then finding a way to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing when I first started using PowerShell, I was working in a hospital, and the hospital didn't have any formal procedures on just creating new users. They had to create. It was a typical scenario where if you had an HR system, like PeopleSoft or something like that, I believe, and then HR would give the PDF, or it was actually a PDF. I don't even think it was an Excel sheet to IT. IT would manually go in and create all the users. And then one of my jobs was that we need to automate this process. So then I had to figure out how do you connect PowerShell to PeopleSoft, and then how do you translate all that data into a way that new AD user can understand and build a tool. And then, that just, it seems like when you start one project, that just kind of spins off 1,000 different ones, and you kind of go down that rabbit hole, and eventually you come out, hopefully learn a new thing or two.
And so for someone who, let's say, who start with PowerShell today, any recommendations, resources? You mentioned, of course, your book and your courses. What role did the community play for you to get into PowerShell, learning new things?
Yeah, I mean, the community was vital back in the day, because primarily I would just search for how do I do this thing in PowerShell. And I'm going to come across, Jeff Hicks's stuff, or maybe a course by Don Jones, or something like that. And primarily one of the reasons why I started adding the Automator.com was just because I would come across, the Microsoft documentation. It's come a long way since then, but the Microsoft documentation was, okay, here's some help content. This is what this parameter does. This is what this parameter does. It didn't really have any good use cases of like, how do I use PowerShell to do this? Okay, well, to use PowerShell to do this thing, I would come across a blog post that says, hey, I was, came across this issue I was trying to query this server or create some kind of management report or something. And it would go through all the different nuances that they come across, real world problems that they would face. And that was key to me. That's why I created the website, because we need tutorials out there from, real IT professionals and sysadmins and developers of figuring out, explaining from the trenches exactly, what to do with PowerShell and how to do it.
Great.
Okay, so and I think everybody who's ever searched something related to PowerShell knows your brand, Adam the Automator. At least when when I think of my first steps with PowerShell and I Google something related to PowerShell, I think your website or your blog was one of the first results I get in Google, and I learned a lot from it. So when was the brand Adam the Automator created?
Oh, I have a terrible memory. It was probably nine years ago, something like that. Yeah, it was probably 9 years ago. I think, yeah, that's when I was, I have ADHD, so I kind of go through lots of phases. I get really involved in something, and then I stop, and then I get really involved in something else, and then I stop. PowerShell, my wife always says PowerShell pretty much still is. That's been the one and only constant, other than my wife, obviously, of 18 years ago, one and only constant in my life for the past, 13 years or so, had just been PowerShell. So I don't know what I enjoy so much about it, but something with it has stuck, and I've just been, using it almost every single day since then.
Awesome. So is there any specific project or something where you say, wow, this was the where PowerShell really was maybe a lifesaver, or where you created something where maybe one of your customers, they benefit a lot from it because they could simplify something really complex into a script?
Yeah, I need to go back. I'm going back right now through GitHub because I can't. There's been so many different little things here and there that I've used PowerShell for. I can't hardly remember all the little stuff. Oh shoot, my phone isn't.
Okay, so we will definitely add the link to your GitHub repo then into the links.
Yeah,
so
definitely
people
do that,
follow.
because how many? Let's see. Oh, here we go. I have 85 repos, and for the most part, there's just been so much. I've PowerShell for. Here's one that I've used PowerShell for: Ghost, to create the blogging platform for Ghost API, all the way down to a movie app. I mean, SCCM stuff, Azure VM stuff. The biggest thing I love about PowerShell is you can apply it to, practically anything. And you can see my crazy ADHD mind going to work. If you look at my GitHub repos, they're all over the place.
Okay, but that's definitely a good place to go. So we will add the link so people can see what you're doing. And I guess you're still actively adding projects there.
Not nearly as much as what I used to. Like I was telling you before the recording. Nowadays, I primarily do courses. I do a little bit of updating here and there. Like, for example, if I needed, I made it a PS Airtable PowerShell module to interact with Airtable's API, and I needed that just this week actually. And they went over from using API keys to personal access tokens, and I had to update that. So I primarily update my modules if I need them updated now. So they're a few and far between these days. Unfortunately, I need to get back to it. But yeah, for the most part, they're just updated when I personally need the new feature.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I think it's time to maybe kind of leave a little bit the PowerShell space and find out what else you're using. So are there any other technologies and tools that is in your toolbox when it comes to automating things, DevOps space? Are you using Python or any kind of other languages? So maybe you can, compare things that you use with PowerShell, or, what kind of tools you're using for what specific tasks? Maybe you can a little bit comment on that.
Yeah. Whenever I was in IT, it was pretty much PowerShell for absolutely everything because it pretty much did everything. Ever since I started in the community and started my website, I started using more business process automation tools. Like I've built some really advanced stuff, more in a lot of the low-code tools like Airtable. I do a ton of stuff in Zapier, and using Integromat, or it actually is called Make right now. So I do a lot of stuff in local tools, and then I use PowerShell. Well, unfortunately, a lot of these tools don't have direct integration with PowerShell, so then I have to go down into JavaScript or Python. I kind of fill in the gaps in a lot of these other low-code tools to, I don't know, interact with an API that is, if it doesn't have support for, or I don't know, do some kind of that Zapier doesn't have support for, that I can natively do in JavaScript or Python. But knowing those tools allows me to kind of fill in the gap with the other low-code tools that I have to kind of bring, everything together. But yeah, for the most part nowadays, it's primarily still PowerShell for just about everything. I'm working on actually a little PowerShell module to interact with Bricklink, a Lego site now, and that's integrating that with Airtable. So I'm starting to kind of build out lots of different things, lots of different ideas. I'm starting to kind of work on a web app maybe to interact with some of the Lego stuff that I'm doing. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much all still PowerShell, and then JavaScript and maybe some Python if I have to kind of fill in the holes with the low-code tools that I use.
Perfect. Great.
Okay, so yeah, then coming back to PowerShell. How do you see the future of PowerShell?
Oh gosh, I could probably give you a much better answer a few years ago when I was actively involved with the team and talking with them on a regular basis. Yeah, nowadays I try to keep up to date with things, but I don't really do that near as much as what I once did. I don't really have a good gauge on the active development of it as I once did. So I probably couldn't even give you a good example of where I think it's going to go. It just kind of, I feel like that, the old man yelling at the cloud nowadays. It's just like I see myself doing that sometimes with that. I have that. I think that is the first part of my book of like, talk about how people will say, okay, that's the way we always do things. I find myself having that tendency now of like, I have this tool now. This way has always worked. Why do I have to use your, fancy classes or your fancy PowerShell cores, or something like that nowadays. But yeah, I'm not nearly involved with, with the team and stuff where I think it should go. I probably can't even give you a good answer there.
But so the direction, with PowerShell 7 and the overall, going open source and sequence management module and things like that, I think that's from my perspective, I think it was a good move to open up also to the community. And any thoughts on that from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea, but from what I've seen previously and what I see now is I don't really see a whole lot of adoption from the other camps. Traditionally it's always been the Microsoft camp and the Linux camp. Like even from pretty much everything, you have your Microsoft shops, or you have your Linux, your Microsoft Azure, or you have your Linux AWS shops. It still kind of seems like that, even though Microsoft has come a long way, and you can use PowerShell to do anything that Bash and Z shell and all these other shells that can on the Linux side. I really don't see a lot of people coming over from PowerShell. Normally, if you're quote unquote Linux guy, your Bash or your Python, that's what you always do, and you'll never use something else. And it kind of seems like to me that they're still not really meshing.
Yeah. I think I have the same impression when I talk to people in the automation space, where even if you're on Linux, you could use PowerShell. You're still, if you're looking at the toolbox, and Bash always, I guess, going to be number one, the go-to, like for the Windows guys who are, of course, using PowerShell. So
yeah, but
maybe we'll see some things changing over time. Any thoughts on when Jeffrey Snover left Microsoft? Do you think that affected the way that PowerShell is developed now?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's No, I don't think so. I mean, he's been removed from PowerShell for a long time, even before he left Microsoft. And I think that, the team now is still doing, carrying on the torch. I don't really think that, even like newer people coming into PowerShell now, they probably don't even know who, Jeffrey Snover is, because it seems like he's a legacy at this point, because he hasn't been really involved. I'm sure he has some minor input, sometimes here and there, just because he was the creator. But yeah, for the most part, I think pretty much his legacy lives on in us PowerShell OGs. But yeah, the newcomers, I don't know if they even really know who Jeffrey Snover is.
It's a new generation, right? Who carries on. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. True.
Okay. Switching from the technical stuff to your spare time. So could you describe, or not the spare time, that's the last question. So just could you describe the life of an offline entrepreneur?
Life offline is pretty much, I have no life offline. My online life is pretty much, I do everything. I mean, I probably do it too much, just my personality, where if I'm not doing, any kind of PowerShell stuff, nowadays it's mostly Lego everything. It's just like my personality. I get involved with something, and I just get infatuated with it. And with this, I started selling some Lego pieces online about a year or so ago, and I got involved with it. And then I pretty much spent, 30, 40 hours a week just buying Lego pieces and selling them, and putting together sets and doing all kinds of Lego. So now if it's not anything IT or PowerShell related, it's pretty much Lego. I still do maybe 20 hours a week on Lego stuff.
Wow, cool. And any specific sources where you go to get Lego, or
I sell used, so I primarily get it from the thrift stores, Goodwill, Salvation Army. They have a website, so I go to Facebook Marketplace, so I get huge amounts. I'll go through 100 pounds of Lego in a month or so. So I'll go through it. My family helps me sort it out, so we sort it, and then we clean it, and then we process it and then we take little snapshots. There were some things you could take snapshot of the pictures, then we list the parts, or I complete sets and stuff like that. And then I either sell the sets on eBay or sell the sets on Lego specific sites like Bricklink or Brickowl.
Okay, wow. So you could involve your whole family in the Lego business.
Yeah, my daughters helped out some. My mom and my aunt have been helping out some. So yeah, I mean, it's nice because to sort Lego pieces, it doesn't take, it's not rocket science. It's just very monotonous for some people to go through. And you have a huge bin of like 100 pounds of Lego. Yeah. It's going to take you weeks and weeks to get through it. Some people enjoy it.
I could imagine this is even kind of a meditation thing, right? If you are.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, some people either hate it or you love it. My aunt loves it, and my mom hates it. I mean, it's just like, how, like you said, it's what's the word that I call it? It's not cathartic is what I call it, because you don't have to think about it. You have it and you know exactly what to do. Unlike IT, that it's like, okay, everything is the solution is so kind of vague, and you sort of know how to get there with, and whenever you come to the end, like you're creating a piece of software, the software it's never really done. You can always change it, update, whatever. But if you sort a Lego piece from the big stack to the stack that it needs to go in, you get that kind of little dopamine rush of like, okay, this is exactly what it needs to do. That is done, and I know it's done.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because actually I met a guy recently who is also into Lego, and he describes it almost like you did, and then he puts something and then together, and then but also after that he's destroying it. It's like, okay, it's done. I've seen the result, and then off to the next one. So that's
see that I get his remnants. So I get those all the time from people. They have like 50 different sets or something for years and years of Lego building these sets, and they just throw all these sets into one bin, which is all the parts are all over the place, and then people like me buy those pieces, process them, and then put them back on the market.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we have one more kind of IT-related question, which is, of course, and we cannot let you go without asking about your take on AI and IT automation, as it is now kind of everywhere. Are you using AI already in your daily business with PowerShell or with other technologies? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I use it every day. I've used it every day for the past, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so. So I use it, well, I think, let me take a step back. A couple of years ago, I started realizing, since I love automation so much, and but automation is mostly, it's rule based. If this, then that. If this, then that. Else this. Or we have strict rules of we need to define exactly what this does and this does. And back in the day, whenever I was writing a script on, I was doing a search for 80 users, and the 80 users at this hospital, the usernames weren't standardized. They kind of followed a similar structure, but they weren't really standardized. So I created a script to do, it's called the Lichtenstein method or something like that. But it's essentially kind of fuzzy logic, where it would say, give me a name that's like this, but it's not always the case. You may have a character off, you may have a character here. So I was starting to do that to really create scripts that were kind of fuzzy logic that we were able to interpret and find things that aren't necessarily really strict character based like that. And then a couple of years ago, I started kind of seeing that, to where AI was kind of an evolution of that fuzzy logic, to where you can just tell it, I want, if you tell a computer, I want a word that looks like this, it's going to have no idea what is this. Well, it's this character here, this character here, this character here. AI, I started to try to get more into AI a couple of years ago. I did a course on computer vision, I think, for Azure, with Azure Cognitive Services. And I started getting into that a little bit, and I fell off. I didn't do much. But then as soon as LLMs kind of came along in the mainstream, I started learning about ChatGPT. I started learning about ChatGPT just because from PowerShell, because originally I just thought ChatGPT was a cool PowerShell tool. I had no idea what it was capable of. But since then, I've pretty much leveraged ChatGPT. I use Claude AI. I use Perplexity. I use a lot of these different LLMs together to kind of help me do pretty much everything. I mean, I've created custom GPTs to, I use them mostly for my Pluralsight stuff. So it is amazing for giving you, coming up with scenarios for your courses, creating outlines and things like, I forgot, if you're creating an outline on, how to create a PowerShell module, I'll just essentially tell it, give me all the features, what somebody would want to learn about a PowerShell module. And then it'll spit out all kinds of stuff that I've forgotten years ago. So it's really good for content creation. We use a little bit of it with the blog. So we created a few tutorials with it. It's not the greatest there, because especially when the tutorials that we have on the site, because it can't do screenshots, and it can't give you the occasional insights of, this is why I did this. This is why it doesn't really get personal sort of things. But yeah, for the most part, I use it every day to do everything that I can think of. Yeah.
Okay. So with ChatGPT is your main platform then for.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So and I think it's, for me, it's kind of the same. I'm using ChatGPT all the time. Actually, last week, the first time I used it for, I went on a little vacation, a city trip, and I asked ChatGPT, because we only had one day in a specific city, what we could do, and it came up with a plan for the morning, for the afternoon, and for the evening. And we didn't do everything, but it gave some inspiration. It gave some ideas, and I think that's what I like about it. It's not like that I take every word as it is, but it gives me ideas and inspires me to take some bits and pieces and then still make it my own.
Yeah, it's amazing. And for everything, you have, something like get a Copilot or the Copilots in VS Code. It's telling me stuff that I just say, give me a function that does this in PowerShell, and it'll spit something out, and I'm like, I forgot all about that feature or that thing, where it kind of brings up this stuff that, since I've been using it for so long, I did it probably 5 or 6 years ago, but then it brought up that I forgot all about that, or I didn't know it PowerShell. I still learn stuff from PowerShell that thing spits out. I'm like, that's an interesting way to, to write the code. And I've actually improved my coding, frankly, just because it's telling me, it gives me different ideas and ways to structure things.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so I think it was good we talked about this as well. And I think this brings us to the last question, Marcus, right?
Yes, what are you doing in your spare time?
What am I doing? Yeah.
Besides Lego.
Yeah, of course.
Honestly, yeah. Life and work have been the same thing for me for many, many years. So, other than, the course stuff and the Lego stuff, I guess you could consider my spare time, having a Lego business. That's honestly, that's about it. I spend, I go on the occasional vacation with my family. Obviously, I have a wife and 2 daughters. So I do the family thing when I'm not doing the work thing. I probably do the work thing a little bit too much from my wife asked me, but yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much just all kind of work related stuff, Lego stuff, and I will hang out with the family.
Cool.
Great. So I think that wraps up our conversation. So thanks a lot, Adam, for being with us. I think we touched on some very interesting topics, and people can learn, if they're going into PowerShell, the way that they look at IT automation. So thanks a lot, Adam.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye, folks.